Yeah, so welcome everybody. Today, 19th December 2020, and Alessandra is going to be the host today. So, Alessandra, over to you.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Today, we're going to be talking about fatphobia, and I don't know, Jemin, if you could allow me to share my screen, please. Thank you. Okay. Okay, so what is fatphobia? It is an irrational fear or aversion to or discrimination against obesity or people with obesity, according to the Collins Dictionary. But where is it originated? Do you guys have any idea? Apparently, from what I read, it started with some freakish kind of movement against black bodies, female black bodies, which tend to be heavier than other kinds of bodies. And then it just turned into it generalized into a fear or aversion against obesity. Now, all this has a lot of effects in all areas of the person's life. And just to mention some of them, and please feel free to add any more ideas you have. For example, socially, they tend to be discriminated on, even bullied at school or mobbed in their jobs. They tend to be people who are isolated, socially rejected. On the professional level, they tend to be denied access to certain jobs or professions. Like, it's only been recently that women with larger bodies can actually work in the modeling industry. Or, for example, in certain sports, other people might even, if they start gaining weight, they might lose their jobs, or they might not be hired for some job. And of course, this comes with emotional things like shame, guilt, low self-esteem, problems with anxiety, depression, or eating disorders. And unfortunately, the medical profession is not free from that. Yes, there are many doctors, like Pilar's Japanese doctor that she was telling us about a couple of weeks ago, who who had her lab tests, looked at them and said, "Hey, you're the healthiest person I know." But there are other doctors that don't. That you have a problem, and if you have a heavier body, they'll just say, "Oh, you need to lose weight." Even cases of, and that has repercussions, serious repercussions, because, for example, I read a case the other day of a woman who had gone to the doctor, and the doctor did exactly that. And it turns out that after some time, she went to another doctor, and what she had was cancer. But instead of getting it in an earlier stage, the cancer was more advanced. Now, I would like to share a bit of a case I had. My first patient, actually, she came to me, referred to by the psychiatrist I work with. We've teamed up. And she was very overweight, but her problems were anxiety and depression, partly related to that. But she also had a story of emotional abuse, of bullying, and everything. And she was telling me how during her pregnancy, because she's not legally married, but she's with a man, and they have a son. And she told me that when she was pregnant with her baby, the doctor diagnosed her with gestational diabetes when all her lab tests demonstrated that her sugar levels and everything, and triglycerides, cholesterol, and everything have always shown that they're perfect, got good, her levels perfectly in order. So now, why do you think this is? Why? I want to hear from you guys. Yes, Pilar?
Pilar.
Well, I think it has a lot to do with the way we are brought up. I mean, many people tend to think that being overweight is a matter of low self-esteem and low willpower, which is not true. Many of the people that I know with the strongest willpower are people who are overweight. And it's not so much the ignorance, the fear, the envy, but it's more on the stereotypes and the things that are expected to control a population somehow, particularly the women. Some years ago, I was size 8. I mean, size 8 is a very decent size. And I went to ask for a job. I had done the interview on the phone. I spoke in Spanish, in English, in French. I answered everything. They were enchanted with me. But the day I got to the interview face to face, the second the guy looked at me, he was like, it's not going to happen. It took me some time, but I finally drilled from him what was going on. And he said, I can't hire anyone who's above size 6. And I believe I'm good looking enough. And I was impeccable. I was wearing a nice suit, a silk shirt. I had done my hair in the salon. I was impeccable. And I did everything that the job required, but being a size 6 or lower, though my job was on the phone. I only had to go to meetings like twice a month, but still I was unacceptable because I didn't have a size. I didn't have a specific look. And this is cultural, completely cultural. Uh, the way they want and they bait us to feel wrong about ourselves because of the weight. And I have to stress particularly the women, because I can put both my hands on fire that if I had been a man, my weight would have never been an issue. Never. Maybe if I had 3 heads, but the weight wouldn't have been an issue if I had the correct gender. And it's terrible because it brings a lot of torture to us in general, because you have to torture yourself in the gym and you have to torture yourself eating food that a few years ago only the birds ate. You have to torture yourself into doing a number of things successfully every single day of your life to fit in a pattern, to become someone they want to look at. It's a way of turning people into objects somehow. Because, I don't want to look like that.
Not
because
people,
I'm not
women.
going to be accepted. And a lot of insecurities of other people are projected into the ones who simply have a different metabolism. And I'm not talking about morbid patients with a weird metabolism things. That's not where we are looking at. That is a medical condition that needs professionals. But yes, as we were talking the other day, it's the perspective that you have. This wonderful Japanese doctor of mine who said, "Oh, you're the healthiest person I know. Now, maybe you're overweight, but you're healthy. You're completely healthy. You're mobile. You're flexible. You're strong. Your blood levels are fine. Everything is fine. Yet, if I go to a store or I go anywhere, I would see other women looking at me, just giving me the look of, oh, she would be so pretty if she wasn't that fat. And I am not a monster. I have baby weight. It's not much. But still, the way we're pressed and all of this is a cultural thing, and it has to do with consumerism, and it has to do with other people's insecurities of what should be and what shouldn't be. It's just running after the impossible.
Absolutely. And
Alessandra, I was just thinking primarily a little bit about why this is such a big issue and why is it such a global issue. It's not confined to any one place. It seems to be there everywhere in the remotest of places. I think so. More or less, what I have observed is that even in the like your picture you've shown in the 1940s or the 1950s, 1960s even, overweight women were not ridiculed so much. I mean, our film industries, at least the Indian film industry, had overweight women as the leading ladies, women with massive hips and, whatever. So it was not a great, whatever, it was not an issue or so much of an issue, maybe just a few decades ago. So why has this become like a global pandemic now? Everybody is fatphobic and, oh my God, you're overweight. And I think it is such, what do you say? It's like one set of people. I mean, we no longer see ourselves as a different races of people, where this comes, for example, African Americans are completely, or rather Africans or African origin people are completely different from, let's say, Japanese. I mean, those ladies are like sticks. Whatever said and done. And then you see these people, or even the Indian subcontinent, or some of the South American people, they're completely different bodies. But what we have done, or rather, I think I should blame the ladies as well as the men for this, but primarily the men, I'm sorry, because they are the consumers,
No,
right?
no, absolutely.
Because they have said that, I'm going to take this one scale, and I'm going to measure every single woman on the planet with this one scale. It doesn't work that way. And people need to understand that. They need to understand that, my body is beautiful, probably in my subcontinent, and the stick thin Asian body is beautiful in her subcontinent, or whatever. So I think this single, universal scale that we measure everybody with, I think that mentality has to change.
Exactly. Now
it has to go.
For example, and one thing that you said is that is very true, and I'm trying to show it in this slide. The stereotypes of beauty, how they have changed even from the 1950s to now. I mean, here on the left we have Marilyn Monroe. She was the sex symbol of the 1950s, early 1960s. I mean, she even ended up sharing her bed with both John Kennedy, the president, and his brother, and she was a size 12. Right now, she would be sent to go on a diet and do exercise and lower her weight instead of having the guys drool over her. On the other hand, now we have a stereotype more towards from the 1990s, I believe, Pilar. Kate Moss.
I have a good story.
Yes, please.
I have a good story of something that happened to me. Back in that day, in the 90s, Kate Moss was doing the advertisement of underwear for Calvin Klein. And it was black and white propaganda, I remember perfectly. And the first time I saw it, I said, oh, they're going to show again Schindler's List? It was my thought. It was
exactly.
It was Kate Moss.
Exactly.
Was there showing
exactly. And she was.
Oh no, that's Kate Moss. What the hell? And just to think about that, just to make that confusion in my head, for it was a second, but still, it happened in a second.
Exactly. And why is that? Because the stereotype has changed so much that now at least 80% of models, including Kate Moss, confessed by herself have suffered from an eating disorder. And how are they not going to suffer from an eating disorder to try to be a size 0 when it's going against normal body genetics and body survival? You have to eat to survive.
So Alessandra, just a question here. So,
yes,
the concept of fat phobia, right? So, my early corporate experience was more with companies that were, the Indian subsidiary of maybe a multinational company, but registered in India. And it was not so much, and I'm talking about in the 90s, it was not so much of an issue when we were actually working with, let's say, an Indian company. But as times passed and progressed, and I was into the ITES space, I remember one afternoon when we were actually in Europe, for a client presentation and preparation for a prospective client, we had, based on the group's, choice, we went to a Chinese restaurant and had a good meal. Of course, there was some, a lot of food as well. And after that heavy meal, we almost climbed about 3 floors. I was supposed to take the lift, the escalator, and I was actually told that, let's make it up the stairs. While some of the folks who had come from other countries across Europe, they actually went by the lift. Me and this Indian guy, he was the one who was a little more experienced in terms of being there, in UK for a longer period of time, about 2 to 3 years. He said, if you were to take the lift, because this is the first time you're coming over, people will start forming perceptions that this guy may be lazy and as a result may not be able to deliver to a timeline. I was actually in a cultural shock. I said, what does that have to do with my professional skills? Because based on my professional skills, I was over here, right? But then in the next 1 or 2 meetings, they clearly knew what my capabilities were, and it was no more a discussion point, in terms of, but so who actually drives this fat phobia? Here was an Indian guy who somehow was actually trapped into that fat phobia. So my question is, Alessandra, who drives the fat phobia? Because until a couple of decades ago, it really didn't matter, right? And like you rightly pointed, people could have been denied jobs just based on the way they looked, which had no correlation at all to their capabilities or the purpose of them being hired, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I couldn't ask a Marilyn Monroe to write up a software code for me, right? Or maybe a Kate Moss, right?
I'm still trying to understand where it's coming from. I mean, the things that I wrote here, like based on stereotypes, on ignorance, on fear, on envy, and as Pilar said, cultural issues. I guess I don't know.
Yeah,
And
I'm
just sorry, Jameen, apologies. And just to add, I have never ever through my entire life suffered from low esteem, depression, or anxiety just because I am overweight or I'm much on the plumper side than the others. In fact, actually, I've put a lot of people in terms of into a complex, people with perfect bodies, in a meeting or, when it comes to work. So
No,
I was a little confused.
I wasn't mentioning it as a rule that if you're overweight, you're going to have anxiety, or if you're overweight, you're going to be depressed. I meant it as a tendency.
Alessandra, what I would like to point out here also is that we read a lot about these models and, the actresses of today and stuff like that. They're suffering from depression and suffering from this thing. So it's a very interesting thing to note that if an individual is overweight, there is a perception or possibility, there is a reality existence of anxiety and low self-esteem. But having the perfect body and having the perfect does not guarantee a good self-esteem, because we see all these women, all these models, and suffering from low self-esteem and, oh my God, how am I looking? I've got a pinch of fat over here of this. But so
yes,
it's like a never-ending circle. I mean, you have it, it doesn't matter. You don't have it, it doesn't matter. So it's like caught in a vicious circle.
Exactly. Self-esteem has nothing to do with your body weight. I'm going to share with you a story of mine back in the 90s. I had gained a lot of weight when I was in the 3rd semester of my psychology career. And well, I hadn't paid attention to my weight all the semester, and towards the end of the semester, I stepped on the scale, I saw the number, and I said, straight, this is unacceptable. Unacceptable. That was the first thought that came to my mind. So what did I do? I went on a so-called diet. I never stopped eating, But the way that I was eating, I had unknowingly cut out all the carbs. And I was losing weight really fast, like 1 kilo a day. And I was going to go to a wedding, and my best friend's mother was a seamstress, and she was going to make a dress for me. And she had told my mother, well, Alessandra has gained a lot of weight. I think I have to measure her again. So I went, she measured me, she was fixing the dress, and that's exactly the same day when I decided, unacceptable, you're going on a diet. By the time she had finished fixing the dress, I had lost all the weight I had gained. And she was like, Alessandra, if I didn't see it, I wouldn't believe it. Everything that I had to fix in the dress, now I have to refix it to how it was before. But because I was not eating any carbohydrates, my body was not happy, and I started feeling really sick when I was with her. And my best friend noticed that she wanted to give me a spoonful of sugar, literally. And I was like, no, no, no. I was so obsessed. And then that minute I said, you stop it. You know exactly what road you can go to. I was already studied enough of disorders back then. So I said, okay, this either stops, or I call another friend of mine who's an expert on eating disorders. So, but I stopped that, but the obsession continued and continued, and I kept on losing a bit more weight, until this friend of mine, the one with the eating disorder, she had her own foundation on eating disorders, was bringing the world expert on eating disorders. And she was like, are you going to go and see him? I'm like, I can't, I don't have enough money. She's like, okay, you don't pay, but you go. So I was talking to this man, the expert, after the conference, and he has this amazing mind on eating disorders. And I was telling him about my case, and he said, he knew, first of all, he asked me about how much I was eating every day. And I bet you're hungry. And I'm like, yeah. Now, I want you to go and look at yourself and ask yourself what you didn't like about yourself when you weighed this, and what changed. And he was referring to my self-esteem and how it was still, and it turns out that it was still low self-esteem. It had nothing to do with how much I was weighing. It had a lot to do with being bullied, but not about my weight. It had a lot to do with having a narcissistic mother, that I was just reflecting on my weight. But the root wasn't my weight. As a matter of fact, now that I'm overweight again, I like myself a hell of a lot more than I did back when I was weighing 48 kilos. Okay.
I guess it goes to show how much this entire concept of weight is such a, it is probably 98 or 97% mental, or rather in the mind, and 3% what it actually is supposed to be, which is physical, which is like nutrition and diet and good for you and bad for you sort of a thing. But more than that, it is the perception, the interpretation, and how society grades an individual based on his or her weight. Now, having said that, though, Alessandra, I'd like to make a point. This is a research that we did in my company where we were talking about why is it that people who lose weight very fast tend to gain back all that weight and overshoot their initial weight. Like, especially we were doing a lot of research on these contestants of a program that used to be there in the US. It was called The Biggest Loser. Do you remember?
Right? Yes,
So
absolutely.
you had these people who were 400, 500 pounds who used to come to a ranch or an enclosed area for about 3 weeks or 4 weeks or whatever. And they used to be this taskmaster. She used to make them run and work out and, you know, pull tires and God knows what else. And they had a weigh-in every week. And here they would go off after 6 weeks and they would have lost like 300 pounds, 400 pounds, you know, like massive amounts of weight. And then there was a study that was conducted on these people, and it was followed through for the next whole year after they left the Big Loser Ranch, the Biggest Loser Ranch, that is. And they found out that 85 to 90% of these people not only gained back all their weight, they actually overshot their initial weight with which they had come to the ranch in the first place. Now, this was a very intriguing thing, and everybody was like, why? Because, you know, it takes 21 days to generate a habit. So if these people had generated the habit, then they should be able to maintain their weight. Why is it that, you know, this whole different thing, and not only gaining back but overshooting? This doesn't make sense at all. And studies have shown that our genetic what should I say? Genetic memory is still centuries old, like centuries old. And our genetic material still thinks that we are hunter-gatherers and we are like people who live in this hostile environment who don't know when the next meal is coming from. This is our genetic memory till date. So have you noticed that when you reach your highest weight, right? And this is general, it's been studied and said, if you reach a highest weight of, let's say, 200 pounds, right? That's the heaviest that you've been in your life. And from then you have reduced down, let's say 100 pounds or not 100 pounds, 50 pounds or something. There is always a tendency to come back to that 200, right? This is because of our genetic makeup, which says that when you were at your 200 pounds, that's when you were the most well-fed. So the body always tries to go back to that place. So this is a very interesting study that was done. I will pull out the study and I will I'll share the link with you. It's a very interesting study of, you know, how our genetic memory is centuries old. And it always tries to go back to the place where we were our heaviest because, well, technically that means we were at our healthiest and we had food to eat. We were not starving, right? So that's a very interesting study.
Yes, and it relates very much to the slide that I was going to show you, that it talks, there is a theory, and the first time I heard about it, it was with this doctor, the specialist in eating disorders that I was telling you about. And it's called set point. And the set point theory says that our bodies have like this weight baseline in our genetics, in our DNA, and usually, because it's in our genetics, our bodies tend to keep us in that weight, in that set point. Even if it changes a lot, it goes back. We tend to go back to that set point. And yes, another thing that I was mentioning is diets don't work. Your studies showed it, and many other studies have showed the same. Diets don't work. Within 5 years, about 90% of the people will have regained that weight. And sometimes, as you very well said, even more. And what happens with that set point when you go on a diet? You alter it. Instead of it being staying where it is, it goes higher. That's one of the reasons why diets don't work and why you rebound and gain even more weight. And a lot of people, including myself, have wondered, well, if I had never gone on a diet, how much would I be weighing right now? Food for thought. Now, what can we do about it? Well, at a bigger level, there are now like certain movements or ideologies or whatever you want to call it that are counteracting all this fat phobia, and they go in two lines. Intuitive eating, which basically focuses on teaching you how to listen to your body again and eat what your body needs, like when you were a child, that you'd eat whatever you wanted, whatever your body was craving, without caring about your weight, and you ended up being well fed. This patient of mine, she was very specific from the first session that she would not go on a diet. And of course, I was never going to ask her to anyway, because what she wanted was to learn more about intuitive eating. And what she was doing, she was trying to do that, but she was also trying to teach that to her little son. He was about 1.5 years, and she was using this feeding ideology for babies that you'd present different foods to the baby, and the baby would, with his hands, choose what he wanted to eat. And she told me that she had observed that maybe one day the baby would eat a lot, especially carbohydrates, and the next day he would automatically, not eat much, and he would focus more on vegetables. But he was following his own baby instincts, and he was well nourished and well fed and healthy. And that is exactly what intuitive eating tries to teach us, to follow those instincts that are in us, that we have put aside, that we have ignored, to fit into an unrealistic society standard. Because, as you well said, bodies come in different size. We have our genetics, and we can't go against it. And another movement that is, and they go hand in hand, is health at every size, in which precisely what they're doing is trying to get people to focus on the health of their body, not the size of their body. Like Pilar's doctor, yeah, you weigh whatever you weigh, your lab tests say you're healthy. That's what I want to know. Do you feel tired? Are you strong? Is your immune system working properly? How are your blood levels are? Not the outer part, not the shape of your body. And that's what health at every size focuses on. Now, that's like at a more general, bigger level. What can we do? And I would like for you to see if you can add to my short list. First of all, be aware of the situation, and it maybe even create awareness about this, and never make comments about other people's bodies. I don't know why people think, a lot of people, not everybody, a lot of people think it's okay to make a comment on people's bodies when it's not. It's a lack of respect. And also, you might be assuming something. You might come up to a friend and say, "Oh, you've lost weight, you look great." Really? Are you sure that that person isn't starving herself or himself? Are you sure that that person doesn't have an illness? I mean, and as parents, especially those of you like German who are parents of a girl, not only should you avoid making comments about her body or about her weight, but you can also focus on more important things that have nothing to do with her body. How she is as a person on the inside. Okay, any other ideas, group?